Throughout the years, animated follow-ups to previous animated films have been an increasingly mixed bag. You've got some that are worthy of expanding the world of their predecessors, like the Toy Story sequels, Shrek 2 and Inside Out 2, but even at that, they've become mostly rare nowadays. For every good animated sequel we've gotten over the years, you would have to wade through the massive pile of terrible, poorly made continuations to stories that were either already given proper conclusions or were never that good to begin with, that obviously exist solely in an attempt to make some easy cash. And believe me when I say that the bad sequels have outweighed the good ones by a lot. Today, I'm going to be taking a look at the absolute worst of the worst out of all the bad animated sequels, where their respective franchises came back for more only to either completely obliterate everything that made the originals so good, or screw up even worse than they did the last time. However, this will come with a few rules. The first is that there should only be one film per franchise, so if I'm talking about something like Open Season, you won't see every Open Season sequel on here, and you're not going to see all of the Norm of the North sequels showing up. And the second rule is that this list must only contain full-on sequels, so no spin-offs like the Ice Age Adventures of Buck Wild or Saving Bikini Bottom the Sandy Cheeks movie will be included. And besides, we don't want this list to be too predictable, do we? So, which animated sequels do I think are the biggest stinkers to ever continue where the previous film left off? My name is Captain Tünland, and the following is my list of the top 10 worst animated sequels. Welcome to Captain Tünland's top 10 worst animated sequels. Number 10. Well, what better way to start things off than the one movie that made audiences hope for the end of the Ice Age? And yes, you know exactly what I'm talking about, especially since I get to discuss the final Ice Age movie made by their creators at Blue Sky Studios. The Ice Age franchise falls under the category of a zombie franchise, where it keeps coming back for more and each installment gets worse and worse. And since we are getting a sixth official movie called Boiling Point even after Blue Sky Studios was shut down by Disney, this is becoming more of a good point. And I hope things don't get worse with that one, especially when the worst films of the franchise are the Adventures of Buck Wild spin-off and our number 10 on the list, the fifth main installment, Ice Age Collision Course. This one killed the franchise's reputation by going down to a point where it has completely run out of ideas, especially looking at the scene from the first one where Manny, Sid, and Diego are in the ice cave and they see all these frozen things that ultimately ended up predicting future Ice Age movies, one of them being the UFO for Collision Course. Yes, that was in the original movie, but it was only used for the purpose of a visual gag, not a full-on plot point. It was in there as a one-off gag, like it was supposed to be. Now the franchise has dropped so low to the point that it has to turn these one-off gags into actual plot points. This UFO usage is part of the scenes where Scrat is constantly going after his acorn. In the previous movies, Scrat's moments were always the funniest in those films, but in this one, not only has it gotten really tiring and pretty unfunny, but now it continues from Continental Drift, where apparently he's the one whose goofy shenanigans with his acorn are causing things to happen in the universe that end up benefiting or making things worse for the other characters, and these scenes have way too much screen time. But that is nothing compared to the rest of what's wrong with this train wreck. The story is very poorly executed, with stupid things happening throughout for stupid reasons. The characters keep growing way too much in quantity and are both incredibly annoying with nothing funny in store, and reduced to some tiring and done-to-death story tropes, such as Manny being the worrying parent who doesn't want their child to be independent, the father-in-law who hates the person dating his kid for zero reason, and the oafish husband who forgets his anniversary. Plus, Crash and Eddie are the absolute worst characters, as they usually are with their terrible jokes, Buck is massively ruined beyond belief, the villains are really stupid with one of the most insane schemes ever thought of, the tone is way too modern and dated for a franchise that's supposed to be set during the Ice Age, and while the animation is still good, it can get way too goofy at times. I can see why this is the point where people got completely fed up with the franchise, and just by watching it, I could tell that even the people at Blue Sky Studios were getting tired of making more. All because the higher-ups at 20th Century Fox saw the profit of these movies outside of North America and decided to put a lot of pressure on them and keep milking out more and more until it got worse. I actually had the misfortune of seeing this in a movie theater when it came out, and I feel a lot of regrets having wasted time on that now. Collision Course is one of the movies that made me hope for the eventual end of the Ice Age. I really hope Boiling Point ends up being the last one, otherwise it's just gonna become the next Land Before Time. Speaking of which, we'll get to that later on. And now for the number 9. Believe it or not, this 1982 masterpiece has a sequel. But don't worry, according to the people who greenlit this, you won't regret this experience if you just say yes. Let me start off by saying that I love the original Secret of NIMH. It is one of my favorite Don Bluth movies and one of the greatest animated features of the 1980s. It brought the original Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of NIMH book to the screen in a way that is really incredible, with a well-told story, beautiful animation, and great characters. However, even if I wasn't born in the 80s or 90s, I never asked for the story to be continued in the first place, and yet in 1998, MGM did it anyways and gave us a direct-to-video follow-up, The Secret of NIMH 2: Timmy to the Rescue, which has been very infamous among the animation community, where people said it was either just bad or absolutely horrible. Where I stand on that scale is a little bit closer to the former. I thought it was pretty bad. The story focuses on Timothy Brisby, the son of Mrs. Brisby, who was sick and about to die in the first one, as the prophecy is somehow stated by Nicodemus that Timmy would be the savior of all mouse kind, which was never stated in the first film, even though the prologue shows the events of what happened in the 1982 movie. This is some of the most made-up nonsense I've ever heard in an animated sequel. But the story itself is very badly written and very badly paced. The tone is a lot less dark, making it feel like a long episode of DuckTales, but more painful than enjoyable. The songs are not only unnecessary, since the original wasn't even a musical to begin with, but they are about as atrocious as your average Kidz Bop cover. The only exception being Just Say Yes, which is just so bad it's entertaining thanks to Eric Idle as the villainous Martin. In fact, he as a villain is just so ridiculous and pathetic that he's probably the most entertaining thing in the movie for me. The rest of the characters themselves are stripped of their interesting traits, spew out dialogue that feels very rushed, and are sometimes annoying, especially Timmy himself, who is just an awful protagonist with little personality and no actual development except that he has to fulfill that stupid prophecy, and the animation is oversaturated and really bad with the terrible lip syncing and stiff movements, feeling more like something that Warner Brothers would produce for their animated series in the 90s, which feels like an insult because shows like Animaniacs, Pinky and the Brain, Freakazoid, and Hysteria look way better than this. What made MGM think it was necessary to cash in on The Secret of NIMH to begin with? This is nothing more than an embarrassing money milker attempt meant only to pander to young kids. I don't see the point in watching this one when you can just watch the original movie, or if you need your fix of a Secret of NIMH sequel, read the book sequel instead, called Raxo and the Rats of NIMH. I'm sure you'll get a lot more enjoyment out of that than this. So yeah, Secret of NIMH 2 sucks, don't watch it, just forget about it, and read the book sequel. Just say no to Timmy to the Rescue. It will only drive you up a wall of insanity. Coming in at number 8... As you may know, 13 is considered an unlucky number, especially Friday the 13th. But when you have a franchise that has as many movies as The Land Before Time with its 13 sequels, the 13th movie is another prime example of that. For a movie as well known as Don Bluth's The Land Before Time, the film's vast catalog of direct-to-video sequels have been typically made fun of by people for being nowhere near as good as the original, and I kinda agree. Now, I'm not saying that all the Land Before Time sequels are terrible. I grew up with some of them, with examples including The Mysterious Island, The Secret of Saurus Rock, Journey to Big Water, and The Great Long Neck Migration, which are some guilty pleasures of mine. But when you compare them to the first one, they are pretty subpar. The stories can be all over the place sometimes, the characters feel different, but not as different as the tone being more cheerful in comparison to the dark atmosphere of the original, the animation looks more suited for television, and it wasn't really necessary to add musical numbers to the Land Before Time franchise. However, the one thing I'm absolutely shocked about with these movies is the fact that there are 13 sequels, bringing the franchise's total to 14 plus a TV show. Seriously, 14 movies? How do you manage to make that many sequels to an animated film? 14 honestly feels way too much, and yet Universal had the nerve, the audacity to milk this franchise after the many times that these sequels sucked with some exceptions. Pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. 10 was more than enough, and you really jumped the shark since the 11th movie, which is inexcusable because The Land Before Time 10, The Great Long Neck Migration, was actually pretty good. But you didn't care that much, did you? You know how I know? 'Cause you just kept shoving the frickin' sequels down our throats until they made us sick to our stomachs. And the lowest this franchise has ever gotten, in my opinion, and for most others, has to be The Land Before Time 13, The Wisdom of Friends. This one in particular is believed by some people to be the reason Universal abandoned the Land Before Time sequel trend until nearly a decade later, when Journey of the Brave was released on DVD as the 14th and thankfully final film of the series. That statement might as well be true because this movie killed whatever reputation the franchise had left by really dumbing everything down, from its story to its characters to its songs to its comedy and even its themes. The story is just a lazy and repetitive rehash of other Land Before Time sequels, where something happens that serves as the movie's plot point, the main group of characters leave the Great Valley to embark on their adventure, they overcome obstacles like the Sharp Teeth, a moral is learned, they reunite with their families, rinse and repeat. The animation is fairly decent sometimes, but it can get a little too exaggerated, and looks more like something that would come out of a 2000s Fruit Loops commercial, and some parts look really off, like why are the Yellow Bellies' tail feathers clipping into their necks? The songs in this one are awful, with some of the worst lyrics I've ever heard in the history of the Land Before Time franchise, and vocals that range from bland to nails on a chalkboard insufferable. The old characters have been ruined beyond belief, with Littlefoot being the worst offender. They utterly butchered him by turning him into a completely clueless idiot who is unaware of his surroundings and is a whole lot less intelligent. How is there any excuse for Littlefoot to be this dumb? Littlefoot in other Land Before Time movies was shown to have more intelligence and awareness than this. He was also the smartest and most responsible character in the original film. Here, they mercilessly stripped him of all that, and also made him the leader of the Yellow Bellies for no reason. How ridiculous can you get? He also feels the need to constantly talk down to the other characters about what are called the wisdoms throughout the entire runtime of the picture. These wisdoms are life lessons that the dinos need to learn for their survival in life, and since this is a kids movie, it is something important for kids to learn too, so it does make a bit of sense to have it repeated several times in the movie for that, but I would have been a bit more forgiving to it if they didn't have to constantly repeat it in those terrible songs. And the Yellow Bellies, who are the new characters we meet, they are by far the worst things to ever come out of this movie. All they do is act really stupid with no brains whatsoever and spew out terrible, overly juvenile jokes, and they never shut the frog up. Yet Doofa and Lufa somehow had the audacity to be voiced by really talented actors like Sandra Oh and Cuba Gooding Jr. Littlefoot and friends have met characters who need to learn some life lessons before, such as Chopper in The Great Valley Adventure and Mo in Journey to Big Water, but these guys are just so mentally impaired that they barely learn anything. All they do is sleep like a bear, eat like a pig, screech like a chimpanzee, and jump up and down like a kangaroo. And that's the other worst thing about this movie aside from the yellow bellies. The way the Sharp Teeth are defeated is possibly the absolute worst and most pathetic villain defeat I have ever seen in The Land Before Time. In the original movie, the Sharp Tooth was an incredibly threatening villain, and all the main characters had to think of a plan, using all their unique characteristics and abilities to defeat him. That's one of the many reasons why the original Land Before Time is as great as it is. But here, they just forget all that and come up with some of the most nonsensical garbage imaginable, where all they and the Yellow Bellies have to do to defeat this entire group of Sharp Teeth is make irritating screeching sounds and jump up and down, causing them to roar out in agony and back up until the rock breaks under them and they fall off a cliff. Gruntilda's defeat in Banjo-Kazooie was 10 times superior than this. It's films like The Land Before Time 13, The Wisdom of Friends that prove how too many sequels can indeed be a bad thing. And that's one wisdom I think we can take for free. Let's just be thankful that these dinosaurs went extinct after the 14th movie. And for number 7... Well guys, it's time to talk about one of the most fundamental aspects of this list, a Disney sequel. Back in the 90s and 2000s, after the financial underperformance of The Rescuers Down Under, their first legitimate animated sequel, Disney did this trend where almost every year they would release a new sequel to a Walt Disney Animation Studios film straight to video through Disney Toon Studios, starting in 1994 with the first Aladdin sequel, The Return of Jafar. Many of these sequels have gotten a bad reputation from both critics and fans of the originals for their lazy writing, cheap animation, and forgettable songs. There are still some good or decent ones like Aladdin and the King of Thieves, the Lion King sequels, 101 Dalmatians 2, Bambi 2, Cinderella 3 A Twist in Time, and maybe Brother Bear 2, but many of these other sequels range from average at best to god-awful at worst. The only ones released in theaters at that time were Return to Neverland, The Jungle Book 2, and in some countries Bambi 2. But then in the late 2000s, the direct-to-video sequel trend came to an end with the 2008 prequel The Little Mermaid Ariel's Beginning being the last one, and all Disney Toon would make after were the Tinkerbell and Plane spin-off movies of Peter Pan and Cars before they shut down in 2018. Walt Disney Animation Studios has released theatrical sequels to their previous films too, even beyond The Rescuers Down Under, like Fantasia 2000, and then they would start doing these more often with the highly divisive Ralph Breaks the Internet, Frozen 2, and Moana 2, and recently with the universally beloved Zootopia 2. But you might be wondering, which one of these would I consider the worst? Well, for me personally, as subpar as Ralph Breaks the Internet, Moana 2, and sometimes Frozen 2 were, they still tried to be a worthy expansion to their worlds, although Moana 2 obviously started out as a Disney Plus series. Both Mulan 2 and The Hunchback of Notre Dame 2 were easily some of the worst Disney sequels I've seen, and Hunchback 2 obviously has much worse animation than Mulan 2, but at least story-wise, they do try to tell a story. So with that said, I invite you to sit back, let us pull up a chair, as I proudly present my definitive worst Disney sequel entry.
I will never apologize!
Beauty and the Beast Belle's Magical World is made up of 4 segments, if you're watching the special edition, otherwise it's 3, that were originally going to be episodes for an animated TV series based on Beauty and the Beast, much like what The Little Mermaid and Aladdin ended up getting. Unfortunately, that series was scrapped, and after watching this movie, I can see why. This compilation of lost episodes is quite possibly the most pathetic excuse to cash in on one of the most legendary works in animation, as none of the stories have anything to do with each other, with less of a plot and more tediously shoved, poorly executed morals. The animation is painfully cheap, making everything look incredibly dated and awkward, and the characters are entirely stripped of their charming personalities and turned into either bland, one-dimensional caricatures or incompetent, obnoxious idiots. The movie tries to teach kids morals like apologize when you do something wrong and forgive others, but it doesn't work because it instead teaches them the wrong lessons, such as how calling out someone for their bad behavior is wrong, and you must apologize to the person who bullies or abuses you, since Belle is expected to apologize for calling the Beast out on his bad behavior when he's the one at fault throughout the first segment. I found it really hard to be able to sit through even one segment in this. The animation is bad. Very bad. Obviously that's because this was going to be a TV series, so it is to be expected, but that doesn't change how insulting this animation is, even in comparison to Beauty and the Beast: The Enchanted Christmas. I'm sorry, but when The Enchanted Christmas looks miles better than this animation quality is almost inexcusable. I'm not kidding. This is the face that Belle makes when she hears something as she's reading her book. This is actually so awkward, it's meme-worthy. The characters' personalities are non-existent, replaced with just bland or annoying caricatures, the absolute worst example being the Beast. Oh my god, what did they do to the Beast? This movie turned him into a far more selfish, temperamental, hostile, childish, and bossy jerk than he was in the first two films, and even overreactive because he gets way too furious over a baby bird in the last segment. This Beast is so despicable that he might as well be the main antagonist of this movie. He even makes Gaston, the villain of the first movie, look like a saint. Also, Mrs. Potts is now voiced by Anne Rogers in this, and honestly, no offense to her, but she sounds nothing like Angela Lansbury.
You're in hot water. I suggest you boys confess to what you've done.
If none of the segments of this movie were good enough to be aired as full episodes of a Beauty and the Beast series, what made Walt Disney Home Video and Disney Television Animation think that they could just take these agonizing and painfully boring episodes, stitch them together into a 90-minute movie, and release it on video as another Beauty and the Beast sequel? It's ironic how Belle's magical world tries to enforce a message about apologizing, when Disney themselves should be doing that for giving us a midquel that will bring you anywhere but a magical world. And coming in at number 6... When it comes to this particular studio's earliest works, and I do mean their first two movies, they don't have a good track record with their sequels, all of which were direct-to-video. But their first one had 3 sequels. The first movie was mediocre, the second and fourth were pretty bad, and the third one was so bad that it had to be on the list. Why don't we take Boog and Elliot from open season and put him in the circus, but this time take away any tolerance whatsoever? The first open season kicked off the legacy of Sony Pictures Animation in a way that made me ask one simple question. What did I just watch? Seriously, this movie was so weird that it left me wondering what I was even watching. The writing is all over the place with the story, the characters are mostly dumb, and the comedy sometimes hits and other times is really weak. The good things like the animation and the concept aren't even enough to bring the movie to any level higher than mediocre. With that said, who even asked for an open season sequel, let alone 3 of them? These sequels are usually worse, especially by direct-to-video standards, with worse writing, worse characters, worse comedy, and worse animation that looks like an unfinished computer-animated series. Which sounds like an insult to computer-animated TV series because even they look better than some of these, but the worst of these sequels, without any doubt in my mind, is Open Season 3. The plot is a Prince and the Pauper type story where Boog switches positions with a circus bear named Doug and joins the Big Top. Yes, it's one of those kinds of stories. The kind that was done a whole lot better in Disney's The Prince and the Pauper with Mickey Mouse. But that isn't even enough to describe how disastrous this is. That level belongs to almost everything else in the movie, because every single second of it is just pain and agony to the point that now the movie is inexcusably bad. The animation is absolutely atrocious, even by direct-to-video standards. Every scene, texture, and movement in this movie looks so unfinished from every angle, it's almost as if I'm watching an N64 cutscene. I wish I was watching the cutscenes from Conker's Bad Fur Day instead, because there is almost no excuse for this movie to look this bad, not even the "it's a direct-to-video sequel" statement. Since the animators weren't given enough of the resources they needed to make this look even remotely appealing, everything in here looks so flat and artificial as a result of the bad rendering. In comparison to the first movie, these visuals are insulting. As for the characters, not only are there too many to count as they just keep adding up after each previous movie before this, like how stupidly massive the Ice Age cast got, but they are at their absolute worst in this one. Some have a bit of significance to the plot, the rest only exist because they were there before, and some are even more intolerable than they were in the previous ones, with Elliot and Doug being the worst examples. Elliot is even more unlikable now that his unfunny stupidity and ill-mannered behavior are rewarded with having kids for no reason, and Doug is just an all-around self-centered and egotistical jerk whose only purpose is to be treated like a ruler by everyone around him. Whether they're old or new, all the characters spew out an entire slew of terrible jokes and gags to the point where it's too much to even handle. Plus, I should also bring up that the circus motif is painfully awkward and outdated, in a way that it presents a circus with animals where it doesn't even address the actually problematic act of animal abuse. It just shows the circus owners whipping the animals so that they obey what they tell them to do, and doesn't even call that out. That's horrible! Considering this movie came out in late 2010, they should have known better than this. Also, did I forget to mention that this movie went as far as to throw in aliens? Actual mentions of aliens? Seriously, they put a mention of freaking aliens in an open season movie. What is happening? Since when was there ever a need to include aliens in the open season universe? And they have the gall to say that Mr. Weenie is proof that aliens do exist? Oh great and almighty being who says Mr. Weenie is proof that aliens exist, enlighten me with your all-knowing insight on how any of this makes sense. Please explain to me how any of this is possible. Open Season 3 is a never-ending experience of chaos, time-wasting, and being overall excruciating to sit through, even as a direct-to-video sequel, an open season movie, and a Sony animation movie. Just do yourselves a favor and watch Madagascar 3 instead. It's a similar animals in a circus movie, and it's actually good. Because Open Season 3 is the kind of circus that I would not want to go to ever again. And for the number 5... Once upon a time there lived a very unique take on the fairy tale spoof. And no, it's not Shrek. This one is a take on the story of Little Red Riding Hood. This one in particular got a sequel in 2011, and guess what? It's absolute garbage. Now, I'll just say right now that I really enjoyed the first Hoodwinked. Sure, the animation is really bad, even for a 2005 computer-animated film released in theaters, but this is a case where I wouldn't judge a book by its cover thanks to the smart writing with a well-executed story, enjoyable characters, and incredible comedy, and even the songs are pretty catchy and well done. It's right up there with the first two Shrek films and Puss in Boots: The Last Wish as one of the best fairy tale parody movies in my opinion, and I can honestly see why Animat refers to it as the best film with the worst animation. The same cannot be said for its sequel, Hoodwinked 2: Hood vs. Evil. After seeing the movie in its entirety for the first time, I was left only asking one simple question. What the frog is this? No, seriously, what even is this? What happened here? Hoodwinked used to be good, or at the very least tolerable. But this one, they dropped the ball so badly here. What is this? Is it supposed to be a movie with a story? I don't even know at this point, because if you can even call it a story, the plot is nothing but a terrible buddy cop film filled with some of the most overused cliches present in some of those movies. Also, how could this be written by the three guys who wrote the original? Because it certainly feels like a case of executive meddling. Is it supposed to be a comedy? Absolutely not, because I don't even remember a single time in this movie where I even remotely laughed at a pop culture reference or a slapstick gag. Maybe except for this scene.
Do I amuse you? Am I some sort of clown to you?
I hate my job.
And the pop culture references are not only unnecessary, but some of them are from movies that aren't even for kids like this one is, yet they're still poorly executed. Is it supposed to be a film with characters that we care about? A strong definite no, because what the movie did to them is unforgivable. Now the old characters who used to be smart and funny in the first Hoodwinked are now turned into unfunny generic tropes who try and fail to crack pop culture references and slapstick gags, and some of whom are even sidelined for no good reason, and the new characters are no different, with Hansel and Gretel being terrible villains who are only evil just for the sake of being evil and sound way too old for their age. And no offense to Bill Hader and Amy Poehler, by the way, they are really talented actors who have proven to have done some great voice work in animation, but they just aren't the right casting choice for the two German kids, honestly. Is it something visually pleasing to look at? Well, it is a visual improvement from its predecessor, but not by a lot, and all the animation did was upgrade its engine to look like an early to mid-2000s video game instead of a late 90s game, and that's probably the only thing I can sorta tolerate in here. Is this even a necessary sequel from the get-go? Because the first Hoodwinked was already fine enough as a single movie with a satisfying ending. I do not, for the life of me, know a single person on this earth who even wanted a sequel to Hoodwinked. None except for one of the most insufferable and toxic criminals who ever set foot in the industry. What even is this? And why did the Weinstein Company even spend a single dollar making it or put it in theaters? Just looking at this, I'd swear this was made to be a direct-to-DVD sequel. And even that sounds like an insult to some direct-to-video sequels, because even some of those are more bearable to watch than this piece of garbage. Also, why did Weinstein even bother to be in charge of distributing animated features when they clearly didn't even know what they were doing in the first place? The first Hoodwinked is their only good one I've seen up to this point, and everything else after just got worse and worse and worse, down to the point that they were like Lionsgate with their horrible animated films. If there has ever been an example of throwing money down the drainy, this sequel is definitely one to count, as films like this garbage, Dougal, and Escape from Planet Earth actively killed any remaining reputation that the Weinstein Company had left as a distributor of animated features. Harvey Weinstein, on behalf of the animation industry, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, and all the women you horrifically hurt over the years in your escapades to give both Hollywood and animation a bad name. Rot in jail! This is a sequel that I hopefully will forget about, as it is not just one of the worst animated sequels I've ever seen, but also one of, if not the worst animated film I've seen from 2011, and one of the worst animated films of the 2010s. Hoodwinked 2: Hood vs. Evil, a sequel in which nobody lived happily ever after. And now for number 4. This is the biggest reason I don't trust Sony Animation when it comes to making sequels to one of their oldest movies. And it's all because of one guy, one familiar face that you may know.
And his name is John Cena!
Yes, John Cena is one of the legends in wrestling history, but why do so many of these WWE promotional animated films exist? People hated many of these movies for being just one big long commercial for the WWE superstars more than actual crossovers with beloved franchises, namely the Hanna-Barbera properties like the Flintstones, the Jetsons, and Scooby-Doo. So Sony randomly woke up one day and said, hey, maybe they were onto something, and decided to jump on the bandwagon with a follow-up to one of the animation studio's earliest films, Surf's Up, and it ended up becoming the infamous 2017 direct-to-DVD crossover sequel, Surf's Up 2 Wave Mania. This sequel really takes away what made the first movie so good and unique, and replaces it with completely awful characters, terrible comedy, and a lazy story that blatantly retreads the first movie, while retconning important elements such as Cody's character growth, where now they make it so that the Hang 5 are the inspiration behind Cody's love of surfing instead of Big Z. Not only that, but they really assassinated Cody's personality here, turning him into a complete jerk who only cares about winning, even worse than the main antagonist Tank. The animation also got a massive downgrade, looking a lot more like a 2010s kids show. Then again, it was made on a smaller budget, considering this is a direct-to-DVD film. But then comes the movie's biggest problem that makes it a completely soulless cash-in. This is just one big WWE circle jerk. This is just a shameless excuse for Sony to show off how awesome Vince McMahon and the WWE superstars are. No disrespect to any of them, I may not watch much wrestling, but I'm sure they're great and popular, except for Vince McMahon, who got accused of sexual assault a couple years back. He doesn't deserve respect anymore for that. But the way Sony did it is beyond blatant, possibly about the same level as what they did in the Emoji Movie with the apps. Even the Hang 5 themselves are just self-inserts of the WWE wrestlers. The Undertaker, Triple H, and John Cena are turned into penguins, while Paige is turned into a puffin, and Vince McMahon is turned into an otter. All with little point to be here except to advertise their real-life human counterparts, and all stated in nearly every line of dialogue, even replacing Big Z as the inspiration that Cody gets. Phineas and Ferb Mission Marvel did it much better than you. At least it isn't a soulless commercial for Marvel, and the writers of that special tried to tell a good story with the Phineas and Ferb characters meeting the Marvel superheroes. But even with all of these problems combined, nothing could prepare me for what is the most disgusting joke in the movie.
I'm the boss. And I like milk. And fish. Because I'm an otter. And otters like fish. I just wish you could milk a fish.
What was that question I was looking for? Oh yeah. Why? Are you kidding me? People actually greenlit this. Sony looked at this disgusting, cringe-inducing, fish-milking fantasy sequence and said, yes, this is what Surf's Up needs. A fantasy scene with the Vince McMahon otter drinking milk out of a fish's butt. What the frog is wrong with you, Surf's Up 2? God, I hate this movie so much.
What were they thinking?
It's films like Surf's Up 2 Wave Mania that are why Sony Pictures Animation took some L's in 2017, along with that stupid Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs spin-off cartoon, and their disastrous execution of an Emoji Movie. Next to that movie, it is in the top 3 of the absolute worst movies from Sony Animation to date, with how it actively disrespects its predecessor for the sake of shoving WWE wrestlers in your face. Just do yourself a favor and never watch this abhorrent travesty for as long as you live. Just watch the first Surf's Up and pretend the sequel doesn't exist. Let every single memory of Wave Mania die, along with every brain cell I lost sitting through it. Because it is a sequel that deserves to be crushed by a tidal wave. Oh, get ready for the top 3. Coming up at number 3... I guess I have to be the one to say this. We never needed a Megamind sequel. I mean, imagine a franchise whose only reason for existing is to cash in on a cult favorite DreamWorks movie that already got a satisfying finish to its major storyline and exploiting fans' nostalgia for it. Maybe with the exception of that home media short film The Button of Doom, not once, at any point in the entire time that I've been alive, did I ever ask myself, oh wow, I've always wondered what happened to Megamind after the original film. No! Nobody cares what happened! He apologized for his actions. He defeated Titan. He became Metro City's new hero. That's it. The end. The story is over. That's all, folks. But Universal just took a look at Megamind's popularity and decided it was a bright idea to dump out a sequel and a TV spin-off at the same time on Peacock. Fans everywhere had a justifiable negative reaction to both of those ever since the trailer was released, and after having seen both of them, I can now see exactly why. On the subject of Megamind versus the Doom Syndicate, the characters are completely stripped of their identity and turned into detestable garbage loads, while the new characters range from completely forgettable and nonsensical to, oh my god, can someone please just puncture my eardrums with an air horn? The animation is excruciatingly cheap, making everything look like a mid-2000s video game. The comedy is some of the worst and most dated I've ever seen. The new voice actors try to do good impersonations of the originals, but their performances are very dull in the end. The plot is one of the most terribly executed stories in an animated film, with no sense of pacing, characters doing stupid things for stupid reasons, and a poorly executed message. And there are plenty of plot holes and continuity errors here and there. Like, how is it that this movie is set 2 days after the first film, a movie that's supposed to be set in the year that it came out, and yet you're desperately trying to be modern and trendy for the younger crowd by having all this modern YouTube and TikTok culture? This is honestly 10 times worse than how Scoop did it back in 2020, where everything tries so hard to be cool and hip with the modern generation of kids. At least it makes a bit of sense to have that movie in a modern setting. Here, there is absolutely zero excuse for this if they stated that it's been 2 days since the original. And not to mention that they actively contradicted the Button of Doom by making it so that the Megamind signal was introduced at the end. Phony baloney, you launched the signal at the end of the Button of Doom. You set it off for the first time in there. You got yourself your own call for help alarm the day after you became the new defender of Metro City, not 2 days. And yet you and your team decided to take stupid pills and forget all that, claiming that this is the first time you're launching the Megamind signal? What a bunch of hippy-dippy baloney. But you want to know what the worst thing about the movie is? You know, besides Megamind refusing to use the dehydration gun on the Doom Syndicate, or how it ruined every character from the original film? Forgive me if I get to a certain degree of anger here, but I am not going to let this stupidity slide. Because this right here, this is the part that really upsets me the most about this feature. What is this? What the actual, honest-to-God frog is this? You mean to tell me that Megamind, who learned how to be a villain from prisoners and was bullied by school children, now mentions that he studied and graduated from villain school? F*** you, Universal. F*** you and your incompetence. I thought the Hang 5 being the inspiration for Cody's surfing skills in Surf's Up 2 was bad, but this is one of the most disgusting misrepresentations of any animated lead character I've ever seen. Megamind is supposed to be taught how to be a villain by criminals while in prison during his childhood. They demonstrate his established character by showing him the difference between what they want him to be and what they don't want him to be, and in terms of school, Megamind goes to a schoolhouse in the countryside where he gets made fun of by his classmates and the boy who would become Metro Man. It's the reason he's as believable as he is in the first place. What reason do I have to believe Megamind as a character now? How does this introduce the audience to how he became a villain? Mentioning he was at villain school instead of having learned his identity when he crash landed in the prison in his infancy? Not to mention that they even had the audacity to show Maki a villain at the end, stating that he's the one who taught Megamind everything he knew about about being a criminal mastermind before leading into the Megamind Rule series. It is the fundamental core of his character, and you screwed it up big time. Not to mention, you made him a completely distasteful jerk to his friends in here. Thank you, Universal, for taking one of my favorite DreamWorks movies of the 2010s and turning it into an absolute joke. Thank you so much for assassinating Megamind with this horrible sequel and TV show. You took a solemn and comedic story about what happens when the villain defeats the hero and turned it into an unpleasant experience. With horrible sequels like Megamind vs. the Doom Syndicate, it's no wonder people wanted to shoot themselves with the dehydration gun. Just take my word for it and never give Megamind 2 even a single second of your time, not even out of curiosity. And for number 2... Now, this is the one that many consider to be the worst animated sequel of all time. But I have one that I find to be even worse than this, but we'll get onto it later. Now, with that said, what is it with Italy and their obsession with bringing the Titanic into animation? Hey, remember that Italian animated Titanic movie? No, not the one with the rapping dog. I mean the one with the puppy dog octopus, The Legend of the Titanic. I even did a reaction to it a few years ago, and it was insanely bad. Both animated Titanic movies from the turn of the century were clearly made to be a desperate cash-in to the 1997 James Cameron movie, but The Legend of the Titanic is just way too inaccurate with the fact that nobody dies in its portrayal of the disaster, plus it's trying desperately to be like Disney by including a cast of anthropomorphic mice and other animals, plus that one grandpa mouse who says,
It's all a misunderstanding.
But The Legend of the Titanic is the one that stood out so much that they decided to make a sequel in 2004 called Tentacolino, also known in English as In Search of the Titanic. There is absolutely zero consistency in this one, as it doesn't even put in any effort to make a connection to the previous film. For example, the English title is In Search of the Titanic, but for the vast majority of the plot, none of the characters spend time searching for or even mentioning the Titanic, as it majorly focuses on the addition of Atlantis, with an army of mermaids and mermen a la SpongeBob and a bunch of misfit toys a la Rudolph. Plus, the dog is now shown to talk in front of the human characters without any trouble, and let's throw in a shark that does a terrible rap sequence. As if the rapping dog from Titanic The Legend Goes On wasn't bad enough. And let's not forget that infamous battle scene of the Atlantis people against the Rat Clan, with the dog shooting a laser pistol. All of this feels like it could only be thought up by some psychotic lunatic during his ramblings in a mental asylum. The only time the Titanic has a major appearance is at the end, where it's all fixed up somehow and brought back up to the surface at a tropical island, and they had the freaking nerve to have anthropomorphic tools in the mix. This is all on top of the awful animation where sometimes the characters' mouths barely even move to what they're saying, and the fact that there are questions that never get answered. I can't even describe the rest of how out of control this movie is. This is a movie where you have to truly see it for yourself to believe the absolute insanity of the things that happen. It's up on YouTube to watch for free, by the way. But I should warn you that nothing will prepare you for the madness that ensues here. As for me, forget the Titanic. I need to search for my sanity after this. Before we get to the absolute worst of the worst, here's a quick recap of what we just went through.
10. It's time to stop. 9.
What have they done to Don Bluth's masterpiece?
8.
Too many sequels.
7.
Worst Disney sequel ever.
6.
I'm done with this franchise.
5.
Bro, you just posted cringe.
4.
Rehashing and retconning the first movie with
John Cena!
3.
Shoot them with a dehydration gun!
And finally,
2.
This is outrageous. It's crazy.
and now for the moment you've been waiting for. The #1 worst animated sequel of all time. this is it, people. The moment you've been waiting for. I get to talk about our victor. The one movie to claim the top of the list. Now, some of you, if you've watched my review on this particular movie, you may have seen the subtitle in the title or thumbnail. And if you did, you've probably predicted this by now and you might have guessed correctly. There are no surprises here. You already know what's coming up. You even knew before you even started watching this video, because let me say this right now. I think that Tentacolino would have been my pick for the absolute worst animated sequel of all time if it weren't for this.
Rob Schneider, derp-de-derp. Derp-de-derpity-derpy-derp. Until one day, a derp-a-derp-a-derp-a-derp.
How the frog is this possible? The original Norm of the North was an absolutely horrendous idea to begin with. When it came out in theaters, every single critic and most audiences, myself included, have been so disgusted by everything about it that I'm still baffled on how this is even acceptable to be released in theaters. This film has it all when it comes to presenting the lowest of quality in every single aspect of it, while also releasing it on the big screen. A theatrically released animated feature called Norm of the North that was panned by both critics and audiences, that had terrible promotion, that has abysmal writing, that has a predictably unpleasant story, that has an obnoxiously hammered down environmental message, that has abhorrent visuals, that has the worst comedy ever in an animated film, that has characters without any purpose or any fraction of a brain, that gave us an annoying polar bear who twerks his butt to the camera in a cringy fashion just because they want the audience to see a twerking animal, is an idea that would give the medium of animation a bad name, because this movie is one of the reasons that animation is having a very difficult time being seen as anything other than a genre exclusively meant for kids, and why some people are still not taking animation seriously as a respectable medium. But I guess I'm making a fool out of myself, because this piece of garbage movie actually somehow made enough money at the box office to warrant a franchise with sequels. At least none of these sequels ever touched the big screen, except maybe the second one for some reason. It's one thing to present an animated feature that contains the lowest of quality in every single part of it and release it in cinemas, but in 2016, not even 1 month after its release in January, after we already saw the financial failure of the previous January's 2015 catastrophic disaster that was Strange Magic, this movie somehow made enough money over a $7 to $18 million budget, and that resulted in Lionsgate greenlighting not 1, not 2, but 3 sequels to this movie. How are there 3 sequels to this atrocity? That's bullshit! The heads at Lionsgate should actually be ashamed of themselves for thinking this franchise was a good idea. And the worst of these horrid sequels is the second Norm of the Netherworld movie, Keys to the Kingdom. No, that's not right. More like Keys to the Wasteland. Forgive me if I get too angry at this point, and I will use some kind of coping skill to cool myself off after this is over, but it cannot be stated enough how much of a grotesque piece of unwatchable garbage this piece of quote-unquote entertainment is. Every other sequel on this list may have been terrible, but they had at least one redeeming quality. Keys to the Wasteland has absolutely nothing going for it. If you want a further explanation on why I despise Norm of the Netherworld 2 so much, you can go to my review of it via the card in the upper right corner of this video. But for those of you who are here for this top 10 worst animated sequels list, I'll give you the quick version of why this is the number 1 worst. I hate this movie. I hate every single thing about it. I hate it so much that I can't even make a joke here. Imagine the angry video game nerd's hatred of any game made by LJN and dial it up by 11. I hate how absolutely abysmal the writing and the story are, giving us two different plots that have little to do with one another, as if they were meant to be two different sequels, and combining them together to make a feature-length follow-up. One has Norm solving a crime scene involving an accusation towards him of a bank robbery in New York City, and the other is set around a hockey match to bet on who gets to keep the ice from the Arctic. And because of that, I hate how horrific the pacing is. It's either the bank robbery plot or the hockey plot for this movie. You can't do both at the same time. You cannot do it. Pick a lane, idiots. Like, what the frog is the point of this decision? I hate the overly fugly, over-the-top animation and how much worse it got by looking even more unfinished. I hate how every single character looks like they were designed by either an amateur with no professional artistic talent or a 3-year-old on Microsoft Paint. I actually had to wear a sleeping mask so I couldn't see what's going on to finish this garbage. I'm not kidding. This is the face on the lemmings when they're shot. Triangular mouths and all. Yeah, because that's the face I would have when I'm shot at something. I hate Norm himself for having barely any character development except becoming king of the Arctic. I hate how selfish Stan is. I hate how useless Vera and Olympia are. I hate the mayor for being a terrible twist villain. I hate the lemmings. They are still some of the worst, most obnoxious, most insufferable, most grating characters I have ever seen in animation that I actively want to see thrown off a cliff like in a Disney movie. I hate how Chase and Maria don't serve much to the plot. I hate how the writers spend the vast majority of the runtime treating the audience like mentally lacking toddlers, constantly reminding us throughout the second story that Norm has to save the Arctic with that completely forced environmental message that they never shut up about. Never mind being subtle about environmentalism like the Simpsons movie or recently with Hoppers, let's just have Lionsgate shove it down your throat with ham-fisted dialogue. I hate the comedy and how it relies on poorly timed gags, bottom-of-the-barrel toilet humor, and Norm's stupid cell phone gags, and that inappropriate and poorly executed joke where one character says he would go pluck himself. I hate how they had to include ethnic stereotypes in this one. Fong is a racist stereotype of Asian people, and the Prime Minister and company are dumb Russian stereotypes, all in a movie from 2019. You know what? I am done. I have put up with this thing long enough. Who thought it was a good idea to greenlight this horrid, disgusting piece of crap excuse for a sequel? Who decided it was okay to turn Norm of the Netherworld into a franchise? Who greenlit this? Just Norm of the Netherworld Keys to the Wasteland. This whole movie with a massive canon assault until every physical copy of it is a pile of broken plastic and recycled into something better. And Lionsgate for letting it slide. This movie is an absolute waste of life and such a slap in the face to everything animation stands for. This goes beyond being a horrible animated sequel. This is food fight levels of presenting the lowest of quality in every aspect of a cartoon. Terrible storytelling, terrible pacing, terrible visuals, terrible character design, terrible comedy, horrible characters, racist stereotypes, a ham-fisted message. All of them packaged together and presented in this dollar store dumpster fire that calls itself a direct-to-DVD animated film. Oh, I'm sorry, did I say this went straight to DVD? Because in some parts of the US, this garbage actually got a limited theatrical release.
I don't want to live on this planet anymore.
If it wasn't for the existence of Food Fight, then I would have easily been comfortable saying that this is the single worst animated feature ever made. From its abhorrent understanding of animation, to its effortless decision on which story to tell, this sequel is just absolute torture to the human senses all the way to the credits. Please, whatever you do, avoid making the same mistake I made and stay the frog away from this movie. Don't ever watch it for the rest of your life or even in your afterlife, because I guarantee you that it will torture your senses and leave you feeling ice cold. Of course, I wouldn't recommend any of the Norm of the Netherworld movies to people in general, as I've stated many times before that I have zero positive feelings for any film in the franchise, but Keys to the Wasteland just takes it to an entire other level of pain, and that is why I consider it the #1 worst animated sequel of all time. And I, Captain Tünland, declare a bombardment on this movie so it never sees the light of day again for a minute longer. Fire! And that wraps up my top 10 worst animated sequels list. Man, this list was such an ordeal. There may have been plenty of bad animated sequels like this one on this list, but the good thing is, when it comes to bad sequels to good animated films, we can always go back to the originals to remind ourselves how good those are. Whether it's Ice Age, The Secret of NIMH, The Land Before Time, Surf's Up, or even Megamind. I'm sure there will be more of those down the line, but no matter how bad they end up being, they'll always be there to remind me that the originals can't be topped. On the other hand, there are some good animated sequels that are worth rewatching, but that'll have to be for another top 10 list. Either way, it'll take more than just watching a bunch of good animated sequels to save me the pain and torture being caused by all this. I'm sorry for sounding negative, but my god, I'm just so sick of having to sit through one bad sequel, and then another bad sequel, and then another bad sequel, and then another bad sequel, like I've had to do for this list. Anyways, I'm done here. I need to find something more enjoyable in my life after going through all that. Until next time, take excellent care of yourselves and have a good one. This is Captain Tünland signing out.